A cold hand gripped Marcus's wrist, twisting it behind his back. On the ground. Now, barked Officer Stone, eyes flashing with suspicion. Marcus barely had time to close his book before his face met the gravel. Around him, children's laughter faded into uneasy silence. A knee pressed harder into his spine. You people think you can fool us, huh? Hissed Stone. Marcus tasted blood as cuffs locked tight. No explanation. No chance. Just skin, judged guilty on sight. And as the patrol car doors slammed shut behind him, Marcus whispered to himself. They have no idea who they've just touched. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The late sun dipped low over Riverside Park, stretching shadows across the cracked walking paths. On an old wooden bench, Marcus Reed sat with a worn copy of Invisible Man balanced on his knee, his fingers rhythmically flipping the pages. He liked it here. The park gave him peace. In a city like Belford, Massachusetts, peace wasn't something a young black man stumbled across easily. But today, even the breeze felt wrong. Two officers walked a slow arc across the green. Their uniforms too stiff, their gazes too sharp. Marcus didn't need to glance up to feel it. He was being watched. Officer Stone muttered something to his partner, a short, wiry man named Greer. They changed course, straight toward Marcus. Marcus exhaled slowly and folded his book. Stone stopped 2 feet from him. ID, demanded Stone, voice dry as gravel. Marcus looked up calmly, keeping his hands visible atop the book. Is there a problem, officer? He asked, steady but polite. You match a description, Stone snapped. Marcus's stomach turned. He knew what that meant. He'd heard it before, always vague, always convenient. What description exactly? Marcus asked. Stone's eyes narrowed. Greer shifted restlessly, hand near his belt. Don't play smart. Stand up. Hands where we can see them. Around them, the park seemed to hold its breath. Parents shepherded children away without making eye contact. Joggers crossed to the far paths. No one would intervene. Marcus stood slowly, palms open. You're making a mistake, he said, quiet but firm. Stone's answer was a sudden, hard shove against Marcus's back, forcing him against the bench. Mistakes are what people like you make, Stone muttered. Metal cuffs clicked tight around Marcus's wrists. The officers weren't rough enough to draw attention, but just enough to make their message clear. He wasn't a citizen right now. He was a problem. As they led him away, Marcus caught sight of his book, lying open in the dirt. No Miranda rights. No explanation. Only 2 words thrown over Stone's shoulder as Marcus was shoved into the patrol car. Suspicious activity. The doors slammed. The park disappeared behind tinted windows. In the rearview mirror, Stone's face twisted into a grin. Maybe next time you'll think twice before loitering where you don't belong. Marcus leaned his head against the glass, jaw tight. Not here. Not today. He had built too much, fought too hard, to let it in like this. They didn't know it yet, but they'd just arrested the wrong man. And Marcus Reed was about to show them exactly how wrong they were. The precinct walls loomed closer, their bricks gray and unwelcoming. Inside the squad car, Marcus kept his breathing even, counting each heartbeat. Anger gnawed at the edges of his composure, but he pushed it down. This wasn't the time. Officer Stone whistled tunelessly as he pulled into the rear parking lot. Greer chuckled, checking his phone like the arrest was just another errand ticked off a grocery list. The car jolted to a stop. Stone turned, smirking. Out, he barked. Marcus obeyed silently. His wrists ached from the tight cuffs, but he said nothing. He wasn't here to make their job easier, but he wasn't about to make it worse for himself, either. They led him inside. The station air smelled of stale coffee and cheap floor cleaner. A few officers looked up as they passed through the main hall. Some exchanged knowing glances. Others looked through him as if he were invisible. Marcus caught a glimpse of himself in a scratched glass window. Jeans, plain shirt, sneakers. Nothing threatening. No weapons. No bulging pockets. Just skin. At the booking desk, Officer Riley looked up. He was younger than Stone and Greer, freckles dusted across his nose, but the same dismissive glance slid over Marcus. Name, Riley said flatly. Stone answered for him. John Doe for now. We'll sort him out later. Marcus stayed silent, letting the words stack up in his favor. Every misstep, every skipped procedure, he'd seen it all before. The clock ticked overhead. No phone call. No charges read. No rights. They led into a holding room, a grimy box of concrete and iron bars. Before they pushed him inside, Greer leaned close enough for Marcus to smell the stale tobacco on his breath. Should have stayed in your neighborhood, he whispered. The cell door clanged shut behind him. Marcus sat on the narrow bench bolted to the wall, hands resting calmly on his knees. His mind worked faster than the station clock. He wasn't afraid. He was calculating. He already knew two things. First, they hadn't filed a report. Not yet. That meant their story could still shift, and shift it would. Second, he wouldn't have to raise his voice to win. They had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Someone approaching. Marcus straightened slightly. His face unreadable. The game had just begun, and he wasn't the one playing catch-up. The heavy door scraped open, and a man in a charcoal suit stepped into view. His badge swung from his belt, his jaw tight with restrained irritation. Lieutenant Eric Massey. Marcus recognized the name instantly. Massey had a reputation around Belford, a man who knew when to look the other way and when to pretend he saw nothing at all. Massey exchanged a quick, unspoken glance with Stone and Greer. It said everything Marcus needed to know. They were covering each other. "You're lucky," Massey said to Marcus, flipping through a manila folder without looking up. "No outstanding warrants. No drugs. No weapons." He paused, as if searching for some hidden flaw. "Just loitering where you shouldn't have been." Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the station. "Is reading a book a crime now?" Massey's eyes snapped up, irritation flashing across his face. "Watch your tone." Stone smirked in the corner. Greer leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed. Marcus met Massey's stare, silent, patient. Massey closed the folder with a snap. "You'll be cited for trespassing," he said briskly. "Pay the fine, stay out of trouble, and you're free to go." Marcus didn't move. "I wasn't trespassing," he said, voice calm but cutting. "Riverside Park is public property." Massey's nostrils flared. "We have the right to remove suspicious individuals for public safety," he said. "Suspicious based on what?" Marcus asked, tilting his head. For a heartbeat. Silence. Stone shifted uneasily. Greer's smile faltered. Massey straightened his jacket, clearly trying to reassert control. "We're not debating," he barked. "Sign the citation and walk out, or we hold you for resisting." Marcus leaned back slightly against the cold cinder-block wall, studying them. They were nervous. He could feel it. They had expected fear. Submission. Apology. What they found instead was certainty, and it unsettled them more than any threat. Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. Massey muttered under his breath and waved to Riley at the booking desk. "Bring the paperwork. Let's get this over with." The young officer hurried away, and for a few tense minutes, the room simmered in hostile silence. Marcus let the clock tick. Every second, the pressure shifted. Not onto him, onto them. He wasn't trapped in here with them. They were trapped in here with him. Riley returned, papers in hand. Massey shoved a clipboard toward Marcus through the bars. "Sign." Marcus glanced at it briefly. "Trespassing. Suspicious behavior. Fine, $250. Without reaching for the pen, Marcus lifted his gaze. "I'll need to see your probable cause documentation," he said quietly. Massey's jaw tightened. Stone muttered something obscene under his breath. Greer stepped forward, puffing himself up. "You think you're gonna outlawyer us, huh? You people always." He stopped, realizing he had said too much. Marcus didn't react outwardly. Inside, a small click of satisfaction. There it was. Sloppy. Emotional. Admissible. Massey hissed sharply at Greer to back off. "Fine," Massey said, voice tight. "You want to play hardball?" He grabbed the clipboard back. "Then you're staying overnight. See how tough you feel tomorrow morning." He turned on his heel and stalked out. Greer and Stone followed, not so cocky now. The cell door slammed shut again, the metallic echo bouncing off the walls. Marcus leaned his head back against the cold wall. Let them dig their own hole deeper. Tomorrow morning, they would learn that they'd just illegally detained an undercover federal agent. And by then, the damage would be irreversible. The hours crawled by, slow and heavy. The small holding cell was lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. Marcus sat perfectly still, his breathing even, his mind sharper than ever. From time to time, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Officers passed without looking into the cell, pretending he wasn't there. Marcus could hear their muffled laughter from the bullpen, casual, dismissive, the laughter of men who thought they'd won. They had no idea how badly they were losing. Around midnight, the cold seeped deeper into the concrete. Marcus shifted only once, stretching his shoulders to shake off the stiffness from the handcuffs earlier. The bruises were forming subtle now, but they would darken by morning. Evidence. He welcomed it. Somewhere down the hall, he caught fragments of a conversation. "Captain's not coming in tonight?" "Nah, stuck at that fundraiser." We're clear till shift change. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. Good. No supervision meant more mistakes. Across the hall, the only other occupied cell held a man too drunk to notice anything. He snored against the metal bars, an occasional hiccup breaking the silence. Marcus closed his eyes, conserving energy. Patience had always been his quiet weapon, sharper than any rage, colder than any panic. A few hours later, heavy boots clomped down the hall. The door rattled. It was Greer, holding a greasy paper bag. Breakfast, he muttered, tossing a small sandwich into the cell like he was feeding a stray dog. Marcus let it fall untouched to the floor. Greer smirked. Suit yourself. As Greer turned to leave, Marcus spoke, soft, almost conversational. You should have checked my ID properly. Greer froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Marcus to see it. Fear. Marcus kept his gaze level. Small mistakes become big problems, officer. Greer's mouth twisted into a sneer, but he said nothing. He slammed the door harder than necessary and stomped away. Marcus watched him go, his mind already moving 2 steps ahead. He wasn't interested in punishing Greer personally. Or Stone. Or Massey. He was here for the system that made men like them feel invincible. And that system was about to be cracked wide open. By sunrise, they would all know exactly who Marcus Reed was. And more importantly, what he was about to do to them. The faint light of dawn crept through the tiny barred window. The game was almost over. And Marcus was holding every single piece. At exactly 7 a.m., the front doors of the Belford Police Department swung open. The new shift of officers filed in, coffee cups in hand, chatting about traffic and weekend plans. None of them looked twice at the man sitting alone in the holding cell at first. But Sergeant Dana Lawson did. She was different. Older. Sharper. A decade of internal affairs work behind her eyes. She caught Marcus's calm, centered posture immediately, and it set off alarm bells in her mind. Lawson paused at the booking desk, scanning the overnight logs. Who's John Doe? She asked Riley, her voice cutting through the morning buzz. Riley shrugged without looking up. Picked up in Riverside Park yesterday. Suspicious behavior. Officer Stone brought him in. Lawson's fingers drummed against the counter. Suspicious behavior doing what? Riley hesitated, sensing her tone. Reading a book, I think. Silence. Lawson's gaze hardened. Is he charged? Not yet. They were going to cut him loose this morning with a trespassing citation. Lawson leaned closer. Where's the incident report? Riley clicked nervously through his computer. It's still pending. Lawson straightened slowly. So you're telling me a man's been sitting in that cell all night without formal charges? No report. No booking. No probable cause documentation? Riley swallowed visibly. Stone and Greer said. Get Stone and Greer here. Now, Lawson snapped. Across the room, Marcus sat motionless, watching it all unfold. His face gave nothing away. But inside, he felt the current shift. The chain reaction he had been waiting for. Within minutes, Stone and Greer shuffled into the booking area, their faces a mix of confusion and forced bravado. Lawson pinned them with a stare that could have peeled paint. Explain, she said, voice low. Stone cleared his throat. He fit a description, Sarge. Suspicious behavior. We brought him in for safety. Lawson's eyes narrowed. What description? Stone hesitated. Black male, mid-30s, sitting alone. Sitting alone, Lawson repeated coldly. In a public park. Greer spoke up, defensive. We had a gut feeling, okay? Better safe than sorry. Lawson turned to Riley. Pull his ID from evidence. Riley fumbled through the drawer and found the worn leather wallet Marcus had handed over the day before. He flipped it open. His face drained of color. Lawson snatched the ID from his hand. Her eyes widened slightly as she read the embossed gold letters. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Marcus Reed. The room dropped into a heavy, awful silence. Marcus rose from the bench with slow, deliberate precision. He stepped to the bars, his voice cool and calm. I'll have my badge back now. No one moved. No one breathed. Finally, Lawson found her voice. Open this cell. Now. Riley fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before finally unlocking the door. Marcus stepped out, adjusting his jacket like a man reclaiming more than just his freedom, reclaiming the undeniable fact of who he was. Stone and Greer looked ashen. Massey, summoned by the commotion, stormed into the room and froze when he saw Marcus standing free, the FBI badge gleaming between his fingers. You didn't say who you were, Massey stammered. Marcus's eyes were like flint. I didn't need to, he said. He tucked the badge smoothly back into his jacket pocket. You made your assumptions loud enough without my help. Across the room, Sergeant Lawson's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone. Captain Rowland's office. Now. Emergency. Her voice cut like a blade through the stunned precinct. Marcus watched them. Stone, Greer, Massey, the false bravado draining from their faces. He could leave now. But he wasn't finished. Not even close. Because next came accountability. And this time, no one was sweeping anything under the rug. The conference room smelled faintly of sweat and old coffee. Captain Rowland stood at the head of the long oak table, flanked by Sergeant Lawson and two department attorneys who had been hastily summoned from their weekend plans. Their faces were tight with carefully concealed panic. Marcus sat alone at the far end of the table, perfectly composed, a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command the room. Captain Rowland cleared his throat. Special Agent Reed, he began, voice clipped. First, allow me to formally apologize on behalf of the Belford Police Department. This incident was regrettable. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair. Regrettable is an interesting word, Captain. The air tightened. No one dared interrupt. I was arrested without cause, detained without charge, denied my rights, and left in a holding cell overnight. Marcus's voice was low, controlled, based solely on the color of my skin. Captain Rowland shifted uncomfortably. There was a miscommunication, who? Marcus cut him off with a single glance. There was prejudice. Silence. Lawson scribbled something into her notepad without looking up. Marcus continued. Your officers manufactured suspicion where none existed. They abused their authority, violated constitutional protections, and compounded their mistakes at every step. He paused. And they documented nothing because they knew it. Rowland's hands twitched against the edge of the table. One of the department attorneys, a gray-haired man with nervous eyes, leaned forward. Special Agent Reed, we recognize the seriousness of the matter. We're prepared to resolve this internally, disciplinary measures, suspension reviews. Marcus's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile. Internally? He let the word hang in the air, heavy with contempt. You misunderstand, Marcus said. This isn't internal anymore. He reached inside his jacket and placed a slim, black recorder on the table. He pressed play. The room filled with Greer's voice, distorted slightly but clear. You people always think you're smarter than us. The blood drained from Captain Rowland's face. Marcus stopped the recording and slipped it calmly back into his pocket. I filed a formal complaint with the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility this morning, Marcus said, his tone still even, almost cold. They've opened an independent inquiry. He let that sink in. And the U.S. Attorney's Civil Rights Division has already been notified. Captain Rowland opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus lifted a hand. Save it. You'll need every word for your deposition. Across the table, Sergeant Lawson couldn't suppress the smallest flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Marcus stood. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm not interested in private discipline. He fixed Rowland with a stare that pinned him to his seat. I'm interested in exposure. A pause. Public exposure. The room seemed to shrink around them. Captain Rowland swallowed hard. Marcus collected his badge, his wallet, and the citation papers, all of it neatly stacked in front of him. Without a glance back, he walked out of the conference room, his steps measured and unhurried. Behind him, the Belford Police Department sat frozen, not just humiliated, but about to face something far worse. Accountability. And Marcus was just getting started. Marcus stepped into the cool morning air, his mind already 3 moves ahead. Across the street, the city's courthouse loomed, a familiar place, but today it wasn't the setting for someone else's trial. It was about to become the front line in his own quiet war. He pulled out his phone. 2 calls. First, to the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. Second, to the Office of the Inspector General for Civil Rights. Both conversations were short, professional, and devastating. By noon, the Belford City Attorney's Office received notice of an official federal inquiry into racially biased policing. By 1 p.m., the FBI's local field office confirmed Marcus's formal complaint had been escalated to Washington. Every signature he needed, already prepared. Every step, already mapped. All it needed was time. Inside the precinct, panic spread like a contagion. Captain Rowland barked orders behind closed doors. Greer and Stone hovered like ghosts near the lockers, whispering in frantic tones. Massey locked himself in his office, blinds drawn, phone glued to his ear. Sergeant Lawson watched it all with cold, dispassionate eyes. By 2 p.m., the first subpoenas landed. Internal records, body camera footage, Dispatch logs. Marcus made sure the requests were precise, not just for the day of his arrest, but for the last 2 years. Pattern and practice. That's what they called it. And Belford PD was about to learn what it meant to have their pattern laid bare. That afternoon, Marcus sat at a quiet coffee shop just off the courthouse square. He sipped a black coffee slowly, reviewing the first responses trickling in from the subpoenas. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply worked. Each officer's complaint history. Each dismissed charge. Each case quietly settled out of court. Brick by brick, he was building a structure no one could tear down. Across from him sat a slim, battered file folder labeled simply, Harkness versus Belford PD. An older case. A young man beaten during a traffic stop. Settled. Buried. Forgotten. Until now. Marcus flipped through the pages, making mental notes. The names matched. Stone. Greer. Massey. They weren't just reckless yesterday. They had been reckless for years. Shielded by weak leadership, ignored by cowardly supervisors, emboldened by silence. No more. Marcus closed the file carefully, placed it into his briefcase, and stood. Today he fought alone. No allies. No cameras. No speeches. Just evidence. Just the relentless, grinding weight of the truth. And he wasn't going to stop until every last stone was overturned. Back at the precinct, Captain Rowland finally received the internal memo he had been dreading. Effective immediately, Special Agent Marcus Reed holds full investigative authority and oversight of Belford PD officers involved in potential civil rights violations. Marcus's badge number gleamed at the bottom of the letter. Belford's empire of silence had 4 minutes left on the clock, and Marcus was already reaching for the hammer. By early evening, Belford PD no longer resembled a functioning department. The lobby, once bustling with casual traffic, now pulsed with a nervous, frantic energy. Phones rang unanswered. Officers whispered urgently in corners. The subpoenas kept coming. The calls from the mayor's office grew sharper. And somewhere upstairs, Captain Rowland's voice rose in desperate arguments no one could pretend not to hear. Marcus didn't need to be inside the building to feel the cracks forming. He had designed it that way. Slow pressure, inevitable fractures. At 6:12 p.m., the first real break came. Sergeant Lawson filed an internal memorandum, formally requesting an independent investigator to review Officer Greer's entire disciplinary record. It was a small thing. 1 page. 5 paragraphs. But it was the equivalent of lighting a match in a dry forest. Because once Greer's history came under official scrutiny, Stone's followed automatically. And Massey's. And, by proxy, Captain Rowland's. The circle of complicity widened with every name. Marcus, sitting calmly in a nearby municipal building conference room, received a text message from a private line. Lawson just cracked. Greer's record opened. Stone next. He allowed himself a single breath of satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't rage. It was correction. By 7 p.m., Greer was pulled off active duty, pending administrative review. By 7:30 p.m., Stone was informed his upcoming promotion review was frozen indefinitely. Inside the department, loyalty dissolved faster than ice under a blowtorch. Junior officers who had kept quiet for years suddenly remembered incidents they'd seen. Old complaints resurfaced from forgotten files. Body camera footage, long thought deleted, began trickling into evidence repositories. The precinct was cannibalizing itself, and all Marcus had done was hold up a mirror. The final blow that night didn't come from Marcus. It came from the mayor herself. At exactly 8:03 p.m., a public statement hit every local news outlet. Effective immediately, an independent federal oversight committee will be reviewing the practices of the Belford Police Department. Any officer found complicit in acts of racial bias, unlawful detention, or civil rights violations will be subject to termination and federal prosecution. Belford PD wasn't just under investigation. It was under siege. Marcus stood at the window of the municipal building and watched the distant flashing lights from the precinct. Red. Blue. Red again. Emergency meetings. Lawyers arriving. City officials summoned. The empire built on arrogance, silence, and unchecked power was falling faster than anyone had believed possible. But Marcus knew. It was never built to last. Not when its foundation was built on people like him, presumed guilty, presumed lesser, presumed invisible. Tonight, they would see him. Clearly. Undeniably. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the reckoning would deepen. Because Marcus Reed wasn't finished. Not yet. By sunrise, the Belford Police Department was unrecognizable. Captain Rowland resigned just after 5:30 a.m. His resignation letter, carefully worded and dripping with faux dignity, leaked to the local press within the hour. The mayor called for a full internal audit. The Civil Rights Division dispatched a second investigative team. The FBI expanded Marcus's authority to oversee all misconduct reviews tied to his detention. The city moved faster than anyone could have predicted, not out of courage, but fear. And Marcus was the reason. At 8 a.m. sharp, Marcus walked through the precinct's battered front doors, not as a prisoner, but as the man they now answered to. The same officers who had smirked at him, ignored him, manhandled him, now shrank back as he passed. No apologies. No explanations. Just avoidance, the coward's version of confession. Sergeant Lawson met him at the front desk. No smile. No small talk. Just a simple nod of professional respect. "The files you requested are ready," she said. "All of them." Marcus accepted the heavy stack without a word. Behind him, Stone and Greer stood stiff against the far wall. Their faces hollow. Their futures crumbling. They still wore their uniforms, but the power stitched into those badges had drained away. Now, they were just two men in polyester and Kevlar, waiting for the hammer to fall. Marcus turned to face them. For a long moment, he said nothing. He wanted the silence to stretch, to thicken, to smother whatever last scraps of false pride they clung to. Then, quietly, "You treated me like I was less than human." His voice was low, even, deadly calm. "You treated me like a threat before you knew my name. Before you heard a word from me. Before you even asked a question." Stone flinched. Greer looked at the floor. Marcus continued, his words cutting sharper than any raised voice could have. "I didn't correct you that day in the park because it isn't my job to convince you I deserve respect. It's your job to give it, without being forced." He stepped closer. "You failed." Every officer in the room seemed to lean backward slightly, as if Marcus carried a gravity now that none of them could withstand. He handed a sealed envelope to Sergeant Lawson. "Full charges," he said simply. Lawson accepted it without question. Inside that envelope were the official recommendations. Termination for both Stone and Greer. Referral for federal civil rights prosecution. No deals. No negotiated retirements. No backroom pardons. Real consequences. For once. Marcus turned to leave, his step steady, unhurried. Behind him, the precinct remained frozen, trapped in the wake of a man who had refused to shrink, refused to beg, refused to disappear. Tomorrow, headlines would soften the story, calling it an incident, a dispute, a misunderstanding. But Marcus didn't care. Because he wasn't fighting for headlines. He was fighting for something far more permanent. His name, his dignity, his place. And he had one. 3 weeks later, the Belford Police Department stood gutted. The audit exposed dozens of suppressed complaints. Lawsuits piled up faster than the city's legal team could contain them. 4 officers resigned. 2 were federally indicted, including Stone and Greer. The department's funding was slashed. Mandatory civil rights training was enforced by court order. And a federal monitor, with Marcus Reed's quiet, guiding hand, was appointed to oversee every policy, every stop, every arrest. But Marcus didn't stay to bask in it. That had never been the point. On a crisp Friday afternoon, he sat alone in the courthouse square, a simple leather briefcase at his side, his badge tucked safely away in his jacket. He watched families cross the plaza without fear. Watched young black boys run and laugh through the open spaces without a second glance from passing patrol cars. He didn't smile. But something inside him, something deeper than pride, settled into place. Marcus thought back to that moment in the park. The sun on his face. The book in his hands. The sudden shadow of Stone and Greer falling across him. They had tried to strip him of everything in those minutes, humanity, dignity, even identity. But they had failed. Because Marcus hadn't fought them with anger. He had fought them with truth. Unshakable, unassailable, undeniable. A soft beep drew his attention. A message blinked across his phone screen. Case closed. Full exoneration. Civil rights violations confirmed. Official apology delivered. Public record updated. Marcus locked the phone and tucked it away without another glance. He didn't need their words. He had written his own story in action, in silence, in resolve. Across the street, a young boy leaned against a lamppost, thumbing through a paperback book, oblivious to the history woven into the bricks beneath his sneakers. Marcus watched him for a moment longer. Then he stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked away, No longer the man they tried to chain, but the man who refused to kneel, the man who made sure they remembered, and the man who proved that sometimes justice isn't a flood. It's a quiet, steady rain, washing the rot away, one stubborn stone at a time. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.